I would love to just welcome everyone to February's virtual Flash Talk, entitled William Sanders Scarborough, presented by Professor Michelle Valerie Ronnick of Wayne State University. We're so excited to have you with us today and presenting today for our Flash Talk. So just a little bit of background on the talk. William Sanders Scarborough was the first African American to hold a professional position in classics in the United States. In this flash talk, Professor Ronnick, who has conducted extensive research on Scarborough, will highlight the life and work of this remarkable but little known historical figure, all the while shedding light on his connections to our museum founder, Francis Kelsey. This talk is presented in conjunction with our new Kelsey in Focus case that was curated by Terry Wilfong in celebration of Black History Month. As always, today's presentation will last about 15 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A with you, our audience. So I would save your questions potentially to the end. You can put those in the chat for Professor Ronnick, and I will monitor that once she finishes her talk. And I also ask all of you if you wouldn't mind muting yourself just to kind of limit, background noise and things like that. So I will turn it over to Professor Ronnick. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Greetings to everyone from near and far, Maryland, Tennessee. I hope special shout out to Jackson State in Jackson, Mississippi. Hello to former students who are out there and from the Detroit metro area. I won't call you out by name. It isn't a role, but you are there, and I'm so happy to see you. Could we have the first slide? I'll jump right in because this is 15 minutes of condensed material. The story starts about 30 years ago when I purchased this watercolor from the Bibliothèque École Nationale des Beaux-Arts up in Bloomfield Hills a long time ago. And so I've had it on my wall for 3 decades. Here it is in Metro Detroit. And I'd begun my work at the same time on Black classicism, really in the early 90s, which briefly defined is the study and influence of classical studies by people of African descent, both professionally and creatively. Next slide, please. My work led me to a truly fabulous discovery, the unpublished 368-page by autobiography of the former slave William Sanders Scarborough, who rose to fame as a scholar of Greek and Latin, was the author of a history-making Greek textbook published in 1881, and served as Wilberforce University president from 1908 to 1920. And while I was preparing this manuscript for publication, it took me 8 or 9 years to write all the footnotes and find the photos and get the pieces of his life back in order. I discovered that Professor Scarborough had a long acquaintance with Professor Kelsey, which had begun at least as early as 1898, after Professor Scarborough joined the Cleveland chapter of the Archaeological Institute of America. Professor Kelsey, according to Scarborough's memoir, wanted Scarborough to visit and attend a meeting of classicists at his home in Ann Arbor. Scarborough says that he was delighted with this invitation, and he actually said that the value of, quote, such invitations was, quote, incalculable, showing the, quote, disposition towards equality and fraternity among people of high culture and learning. Again, this is 1898. Plessy versus Ferguson, we're moving into what will become heightened racism under Woodrow Wilson, but this is 1898. Next slide. Oh, and then you can see there's the biography of Professor Kelsey. I put the cover up there if you're interested in that. So we've got the two men's stories. Next slide, please. Now, I was wondering how this had happened. Why would Kelsey pay attention to Scarborough when he himself was not sort of noticed by many classicists during this period? And so I began to investigate Kelsey's family. And I think it was due in part to Kelsey's, the family on his mother's side in particular. He was born in Ogden, New York, which isn't too far from Rochester, New York. And as you know, he went to school there. Rochester, too, is famously associated with Frederick Douglass, who's buried in Rochester, New York. But more important is the anti-slavery connection and the sentiments against slavery among several of Kelsey's family members. And here's just one example. This could be a whole other lecture. This is his mother's brother, John Townsend Trowbridge. And he was, among other things, a witness to the recapture of Anthony Burns in 1854. He was in the crowd of 50,000 people who lined the streets in Boston as he was led down to the harbor to be put on a ship to be sent back into slavery in Virginia. He's also the author of several anti-slavery novels and an eyewitness account of a trip he made in the South right in after the war ended in 1865. So there's more to this story, but not for today. And of course, you can see he's there with Mark Twain. Next slide, please. There's also a very curious connection antedating Professor Scarborough and Professor Kelsey's acquaintance, and that is through the Cesnola collection, parts of which are in Ann Arbor with you all. 200 pieces were purchased. Cesnola is a controversial figure, but he was once head of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He also served on the Union side in the Civil War and was captured in a battle tied in with the Battle of Gettysburg. He was in prison at Libby Prison, and then he was freed, and then he became a consular diplomatic appointee to Cyprus. And out there, he gathered thousands of antiquities, which were brought back and in part exhibited at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Interestingly enough, 1878, Scarborough is 26 years old. He's in New York, and so for a little refreshment, he went to the museum and he saw the Cesnola collection. He wrote about it for the AME Church's newspaper magazine called Christian Recorder, and he called it Summer Saunterings. And he praised seeing these pieces. He said that an hour or two spent there was well worth all the time. I'm paraphrasing. If you want the article, I can find it for you and send it to you. It's in his collected works. One wonders if there's a piece in Ann Arbor upon which Scarborough focused himself when he was there in 1878. I think there's no way of figuring that out, but it could be that there's an actual item that's in Ann Arbor that Scarborough saw. Next slide. Both men were, of course, fascinated with the ancient sites in Rome and Athens and Greece. Scarborough had hoped to go to Athens. He never got there, but he did travel to Italy, to Europe and Italy. He was overseas 3 times, and on 2 of his trips, he went with his wife, who is Caucasian, and she taught at Wilberforce longer than he. She's standing next to the flagpole in the back row with the large hat, and he's down on your left, far left, with his hands on his knees at the sitting very formally in that photo. And so the photo to your left is Sarah Scarborough from upstate New York, born in upstate New York, in Rome. And it's dated 1910, but it's really 1911 when she got there. And then there's just another photo of her a year before they got married. So Scarborough himself went up to Mount Vesuvius. He looked into the volcanic what should we call it, the crater. He traveled and saw various things while he was in Naples, and he gave an account of this in his autobiography. Next slide, please. See if I can wrap this. Scarborough was a 44-year member of the American Philological Association, and he gave either 24 or 25 papers. There's a little discrepancy in the record. I have on the left for you the list of the papers, the dates, and the places he presented them. I suspect he might be the person who gave the most papers at the APA. No one has calculated this number before, but in 44 years, he was on the program 24 or 25 times. I'm up to 23. I'm hoping I could get on one more year and at least get close to tying our Professor Scarborough. And excitingly enough, because Scarborough had tried very hard to get to Athens, he would have been the first African-American at the American School for Classical Studies in Athens. He wasn't. It was John Wesley Gilbert, another fellow who taught at Howard, also had hoped he could go, but they didn't make it. However, the American School 3 summers ago set up a fellowship in Scarborough's name to bring students, give them an opportunity he never had to come to Athens. So this is pretty fabulous. The MLA also has a book award, the Modern Language Association, after I proved in 2000 that he was their first African-American member. So we've got 2 prizes now named for him. Nothing sad to say from the APA. Next slide, please. Things were not always so jolly. I've left out a lot of things that aren't so pleasant. Scarborough himself would get up from any damages he suffered in various ways during his life and just march on. But in particular for us as classicists is the unfortunate incident in the Baltimore APA meeting in 1909. This was the 40th anniversary of the APA. There was an anniversary banquet set up. Scarborough subscribed to it. He had, high hopes of, seeing some of these friends and people he hadn't seen in many, many years. However, he was told that he would not be admitted because of his race. And it fell to Professor Kelsey, who was then secretary of the APA, to respond. And he writes, this is in Scarborough's records, that the manager of the hotel just simply wouldn't allow it, that Baltimore was a southern city, and that the officers did the best they could. Scarborough says, quote, it was the first time that he had been subject to a discourtesy from the APA. I wonder if we could get the APA to apologize. Is that too far-fetched? I mean, it's 1909, and he's in a league by himself. Next slide. And I'm coming in for a landing for you all. This, again, watercolor brings these 2 men together today for us, but also in time. You can see that they both die within really a year of each other. They are real contemporaries, and their fascination with the ancient world was a unifying element in their lives. Kelsey is well known. Scarborough deserves to be better known. And I will sum up from the foreword that Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. wrote to the collected works of William Sanders Scarborough, published by Oxford University Press. It's about 600 pages, and that's not everything he wrote. It had to edit things out. He said in the foreword, if W.E.B. Du Bois, the antecedent of today's Black public intellectuals, himself has an antecedent, it is W.S. Scarborough, the Black scholar's scholar. There. I'm done. As fast as I could get through in 8 minutes or 10 minutes to give you a chance to ask questions. Is trying to condense this into one little nutshell. I hope I have made my case successfully.
Thank you so much. I will now stop sharing the PowerPoint and we can go into the question and answer portion if that's all right. Okay, so feel free to unmute yourselves and ask your questions of Professor Ronnick, and you can also put your questions in the chat too, and I can read those out to her.
I see Ward Briggs out there. I didn't know you were there. Hello to Ward. Professor Briggs is a fabulous exponent of our studies of classical tradition, classical reception, and the biographies of our classicists.
Well, I'm on the down low, but I'm wondering, the 1909 incident is well known, or maybe it should be a lot better known. But as you know, Richard T. Greener was accepted to give a paper at the APA in 1876, 1877 maybe, which he never was able to give for various reasons. But what do you think his reception? And that meeting was held in Baltimore, and the president was Gildersleeve. What do you think would have been his reception in Baltimore? And what Greener's reception in Baltimore, would it have been any better or worse than Scarborough's in 1909?
I don't know, Professor Briggs. It's hard to do history in the subjunctive mood to the extent that we don't have all the facts. I would guess it wouldn't be very pleasant all around, even though he is Harvard University's first BA graduate, Greener. Those credentials would only go so far probably for him. I don't know. What it suggests, your question suggests that we may find evidence lying on some dusty shelf in an archive yet to explain some of these events. Maybe Greener did that just, and I know this sounds a little adversarial, but maybe some of these efforts were made just to see perhaps if he could get a paper accepted, and he wouldn't or couldn't go. I don't know. I don't know. It's a fabulous question. And let's just keep digging through our attics and looking through, Greener's diploma, you know this, from the University of South Carolina, was found in a chest in Chicago not too long ago. And right, Ward, remember?
Yes, it's absolutely right. And now there's a 10-foot statue to him in front of the library.
Yeah. And a footnote to this, Ward, just to sort of go from the alpha to the omega, Greener actually says when he went back to visit a University of South Carolina after he came back from his diplomatic appointment at Vladivostok, Russia, all his things had been destroyed in the earthquake in San Francisco. This is 1906. And he came back, he wanted to see what was, I guess, visit, maybe other reasons to be in Columbia. But he said he went on campus and he pretended to pass as a white person. He was a light-skinned man, might have looked Portuguese or something. But he said he actually had to go, he went on campus because by then segregation was back in force. There were no African Americans on campus going to school, as there had been, 1876 or so. And he said there were some people that knew who he was, but nobody let on of who he was. So that this kind of, it's a whole other side to our discipline that we don't have all the evidence on. But to go back to where he was the librarian there, he taught moral philosophy and classics, and then to go back on campus and pretend he's somebody he wasn't is quite amazing to me. Anybody else have a question? Did I provoke controversy, or I hope not. I provoke curiosity.
I have a question about the APA. I'm guessing that it was your impetus that started these scholarship funds and this like recognition of Scarborough. How do we or have you tried to be in contact with the APA? And if not, how could like a group effort go about getting something established in the APA, or something that acknowledges their wrong of him from over 100 years ago?
Well, Sierra, you've asked a very hard question, because I have tried and I have failed. I'm glad that the MLA responded immediately, setting up the book prize in 2001, and absolutely delighted with the American School. But I won't recount the specifics of you can imagine several attempts to ask people in the APA, including even some recent ones, saying, what if Scarborough is the man who gave the most papers at the APA? Wouldn't we want to know that? Wouldn't it show an incredible effort on our American intellectual front to do this work? And I got sort of like, well, we're not interested in those sorts of metrics. I've had some strange responses. When I raised an issue back in the 90s about him, I was told, because I went to the minority scholarship folks, and they said, well, what about minorities from the Asian community or the Hispanic community? Well, okay, tell me who they are. You tell me who they are. And even if you do know who they are, what's wrong with starting out with, and name it for Greener, not Scarborough. Greener joined in 1875. That's 6 years after the APA starts. That's pretty early. And it says something very interesting about the APA. I mean, I've suspected that a number of the members were sort of descendants of the abolitionist folk. And that may be one of the reasons this group started, had this sort of maybe more open arms. I wrote a pamphlet on the first 12 Black members of the APA, 1875 to 1925. And as Professor Briggs mentions, Greener may have been ready to give a paper or whatever happened, but he's not the first person to give a paper. We see it with Scarborough. The second Black member, Edward Blyden, the Pan-Africanist, he never gave a paper. And in fact, most of the names of the 12 in this piece that I did, it was published by the SCS, so I will say good things about that. Most of them did not give papers. You never see them on the program. They were members for various times, but Scarborough is the one who shows up again and again and again, traveling when it would have been risky many times getting on a train. Do you know if you'll get kicked off? He also was told at an MLA meeting to stay in a sordid hotel meeting, a hotel at one of the MLA meetings. He was on the program to do something. His wife was an MLA member. They are the first interracial couple of the MLA. I've never broached that with them, but they are. Scarborough himself went to Williams College in the summer. APA used to meet in the summer when it's like 90 or 100 degrees in some of these places. He got there late and that he couldn't stay in the hotel. He slept in a railroad sort of traction shed. It's the most amazing story. I mean, really amazing, because his paper, of all things, was on meals in antiquity, Deipnon, Prandium, Cana, whatever. He was talking about meals. And all he says about sleeping in this traction shed, which may have reminded him of his father. His father worked for the Georgia Railroad, and he was, as a little boy, brought food to his father. He delighted in his father's connection. He had a relatively important position. Maybe that sustained Scarborough, because he gets up and he says in his autobiography, in that Scarborough subtle way, he said something about the paper he was rushing off to give the paper, and then about meals. And he said he knew what it was like to miss one. Don't you have to laugh? he rolls in, and it's in the summer. He probably needs to bathe. He hasn't had dinner. He hasn't had breakfast. And what does he do? He doesn't say, oh, they're going to hate me at the meeting. Or he just gets up and he goes right in. He probably brushes the dust off his suit. And he doesn't say anything else. But who of us could go to a meeting and have to sleep in some sordid room? Or it's just amazing. So I put him up as an example of, I'm going to do this work no matter what. I will get up and keep doing this. And you can tell I'm his biggest fan. Really. But that's the kind of drive we want as scholars, don't we? We're going to push through to the end. Another footnote, it's 3 a.m. I don't think I can do it. 5 more footnotes, it's 6 a.m. We can do it. So I just love this story, these tales. And he must have enjoyed going to the meetings. Why would he go back again and again and again?
Especially after sleeping in a boxcar, especially. That's
it was some sort of a addition to the rail station. He tells us what it is. I didn't try to go back and find it. All right, I never went to Williams College to see if he scraped his name on the wall in the railroad station. But yeah, no, he's just holding to himself to this higher purpose. He's not going to be dissuaded from what he's going to do. And those of you who have done this work in classics, think of the times when you think you're just at the wall and you can't finish something, or you won't, or it's too much trouble. It's very exciting to me. So anyway, we'll see how it all goes, Sierra. I think that he does deserve a look. I mean, not even a shaming kind of thing. We acknowledge this and we thank him for still sticking with the group. He stays until he dies. He died in 1926. They made him a lifetime member of the APA, 44 years, joining in 1884. Sounds pretty good to me. Anybody else? Please.
Professor Ronnick, we have a comment or question in the chat here from one of our curators, Suzanne Davis. She said, do you know about the Hansberry Society? And then she provides a link. And she said, I feel like this could be a model for the APA potentially.
Well, I know about that Hansberry Society in general. Perhaps it could be a model for the APA. I don't know. I would happily hand the torch of Scarborough's progress in the world to you all. I have jokingly, but with some seriousness, said, if I were to get run over by a bus, one of you is going to have to pick up the pieces and march on. There are things that other people can add new ideas. So I applaud that. If we can think of some new angle, it would be amazing. For example, John Wesley Gilbert, who is the first African-American to go to the American school in Athens, I've heard word that a new historical plaque is going to go up in May in Augusta, Georgia, which is his hometown. So I even suggested, I know you're going to think I'm mad, I suggested to some folks I knew who were going to the APA in Chicago just past, to go put a wreath on Greener's grave. Greener, their first African-American member, is buried in Chicago. So go take a picture and put it on your webpage. Here we are at Greener's grave. Wouldn't that be something reasonably appropriate? He joined in 1875. I got no traction. There are many angles, and I applaud your interest, because I've carried the ball so far. At some point, I can't. I have no more angles, or they'll get fewer and fewer. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks so much for your talk today, Professor Ronnick. If possible, I'd like to learn more about you finding Scarborough's manuscript. What led to that discovery? It seems remarkable to be able to find this full manuscript and be able to take it all the way to publication.
Well, in a nutshell, in the early 90s, I started reading because of my training under Meyer Reinhold at Boston University, who did all, as Professor Briggs will acknowledge, was really a pioneer in what used to be called classical tradition. Now it's classical reception. You know, the look back in the 70s and 80s was sort of to white men, which is interestingly enough, you know, and then women were there. And I started reading about people of African descent. I figured that there had to be African, particularly in this country, African Americans who went up through the HBCU system in particular, who had to have had classics, because it was the measure of everything. Classics was it. You didn't get into school without classics. And lo and behold, sitting in the library, so often that I was told I should have a job in the library, both at the DPL and Wayne State. I was just reading and reading and reading. And I saw this 600-word account, or maybe it was 700-word account of Will Scarborough in the Dictionary of Negro Biography by Winston and Logan that came out from Norton in 1984. And it said that he had written a Greek textbook, and that I think it actually said he had written an autobiography, but the fact that he wrote a Greek textbook, and you couldn't have asked a classicist if they knew about African-American authorship of a Greek textbook. Then I started digging, and I found an article, you know, some materials. I became well familiar with the AME Church Review and a number of publications that aren't regularly read by classicists. That the manuscript was supposed to have been published in the 70s with some money from the Ford Foundation by Wilhelmina Robinson from Central State University, which was carved out of Wilberforce in 1949. And you will be probably perplexed to know that the founder of that school is supposedly, the founding mother is Mrs. Scarborough. I have a former president, John Garland, who said that we consider her the mother of our school, but that's another story. But anyway, so I thought, okay, I've got to go down to Wilberforce. It's got to be there, and this is the scene of the action. And I'd heard about his fabulous house, a Queen Anne style house that had been the home of all subsequent presidents of Wilberforce. So I got in my ancient Volvo, and I drive down with a friend, and we're going to find all these things. Well, the house was under a parking lot, and the manuscript was not there. I went to Central State. They supposedly had things in their archives, particularly some Mrs. Scarborough things, including the paper, their correspondence papers that had the name of their house, Tretton Place, which is another fabulous story. I got there, I had to put on my white gloves. They brought the folders out. I thought I'm going to find something great. It was pieces of paper that had been washed clean by the tornado of 1974. They had still the impression of Tretton Place, but I had no magical way to even see what was written. It had been all washed off by the rain. So then I thought, this is it. I'm not going to go anywhere. Well, do you want to hear a strange story? I was downtown I had a friend with me because we couldn't use photocopying machines. Everything had to be written by hand at this point in the archives at Wilberforce, and our hands were like crab claws. So we went downtown to just take a break. Xenia is the nearest downtown. And there was a used goods store in a place that looked like an old Woolworths with big glass panes and furniture, sort of an antique store thing, but really big. So we went in there just for a little visual recreation. And I'm walking around listening to this music that was sung by the owner's daughter, and she's in Tennessee trying to break into this country music. I'm distracted. My friend said, come over here, come over here. He picked up a volume. There were only a few books in that store. It actually had William Scarborough's bookplate in it. So I thought, I got stuck here at Wilberforce. I'm not giving up. And then I found where his Greek textbook was. There are 9 so copies left. One is at Oberlin. One was at Wilberforce. And then I found the lodestone. a listing of papers that were supposedly in the Ohio Historical Society at Columbus, Ohio. And guess what? The manuscript that was supposed to be prepared in the 1970s by Wilhelmina Robinson from Central State was there. It was a typescript. It wasn't whatever he might have written in handwriting, preparing it, you know, at the end of his life. Again, he died in 26. Then I found it. So I got that in a microfilm. I also found his wife's papers, which were at Western Reserve Historical Society. And because I couldn't move down there for a month to study them, I had them all microfilm. So then I have all her stuff. I have his autobiography. I printed it all out. It's a stack taller than I think, of pages. And then I just started making the notes and checking everything and finding out when he said he was written up in the Kansas City Star that he was, and that when he did this, he did that. And that was 8 years later. Finding the photos, I met a descendant of his wife. His wife was married at age 14, divorced by age 18 with 2 children, a boy who dies. She'd been married to a Civil War veteran before she ends up marrying Will. And there's a descendant. And that woman, she's now gone, Sarah Grant. She had a whole house full of their things. So I went and took all these photographs, and she gave me Will Scarborough's cufflinks, and I have Sarah's hair ornaments. I have some of their books. I have some Confederate money they had. It was a great detective story. So does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I refused to be stopped. When I hit a roadblock, I backed up and turned down another road. And then while I was doing the autobiography, I gathered up his published works from 1875 to actually posthumously after he died in 26. That was 10 years. There was no bibliography of his work. So I would go through 40 years of a journal he was published in, supposedly, you know, in 1 year. And I'd go through all 40 years and I'd find another 6 articles that no one knew that he had published. And then I collected his wife's fiction. I've never gotten that published yet. She published prolifically in women's magazines. I have 425 pages of her stories, for which she was actually paid. She kept a notebook, $10, $5, $2. She was paid for author of women's fiction, some historical stuff, and some poetry. So between the 2 of them, it also suggests that at night, they were at their desks with their pens, writing away, opening up their mail, saying, oh, it was just accepted by the, you know, the whatever newspaper. It's really a wonderful story. I think it should be a film. Any of you all screenwriters out there, you've got every element in this story you could ask for. It's just a great American story. And she, again, taught at Wilberforce longer than he did. He retired in 20, she retired in 1921. 90 years of service to what was then the leading school for African-American education, run by African-Americans, founded by African-Americans. Most HBCUs can't, well, they can't, none of them can claim that. Wilberforce has got it. Other questions? Do I seem like a mad person? Yes, I had to sustain this effort.
So I think just in the interest of time, maybe we'll take one more question for Professor Ronnick.
Oh, may I add a footnote? If you have a question, please write to me. I'll try to answer it. You know, if we need a phone call or something, because what if you find a Will Sanders Scarborough bookplate? I can tell you what they look like. I actually gave one to Emory University's library in honor of their retiring curator, Randall Burkert, who did a fabulous job with their African-American materials. So there's one safe there. I have one still. I actually have a copy of, just a photocopy of his wife's bookplate. So these are real bookworms. They're just, they kept their own libraries, all their materials. So anyway, go ahead. The one in the US, I'm sorry, I got carried away. Stephanie, you're going to ask me something.
Oh, I was just gonna say, would you feel comfortable sharing your email in case people wanted to follow up with you?
Yes, it's my Wayne State email. It's aa3276@wayne.edu. Or you can find me. I'm sure you could locate me out in the virtual world. But are there questions? I'm just hoping you are going to have a Scarborough moment someday, somewhere. And maybe I won't even be here, but something will pop up somehow. Maybe it'll be some other kind of research. I'm hoping some Kelsey material pops up somewhere that explains some of this. I don't know.
Absolutely. So Professor Ronnick, I just want to say, it looks like Suzanne has raised her hand.
Yeah, Stephanie, I wondered, kind of like on your last point, Professor Ronnick, we know that Kelsey was a really prolific letter writer, and I wonder if you were able to find letters in the Kelsey archives from Will Scarborough.
No.
Okay.
No, I asked. I actually did go through. I've asked several times, and what I've heard is there's nothing there from him. Let me just say, though, I'm not going to say that this is true about Ann Arbor's collections of archives, but things show up in strange places when you start looking through papers. I'll tell you a story from Tuskegee. I was at Auburn. The photo installation was there. My Black Classicist photo installation, which has been in circulation since 2003, and it was there in 2004. And I got a chance to go out to Tuskegee. I needed to go because Will Scarborough was an honorary pallbearer for Booker T. Washington's funeral. Booker T. had died in November of 1915. And I had never found this corroborating evidence. Again, in the autobiography, he'll say that I did this or I did that. Well, we scholars want to know that it's that you can find it in the record. So we went out, and I got to see Washington's house. I've seen Frederick Douglass's house. I was bemoaning the fact that Will Scarborough's house is gone. Went to the archives, and I asked if there was, say, a Scarborough file. And of course, none of Washington's papers are there, but the principal who succeeded him, R.R. Moton's papers are there. And so they said, well, no, but we have his. And I knew Scarborough knew R.R. Moton. He knew Booker T's wives, Olivia Davidson Washington, and his third wife. They were friends. So they told me they had his papers arranged alphabetically, but not per se by name. So they brought me this huge S file, right? And guess what's in the S file? Pages of Scarborough. I knew his handwriting from going blind looking at this manuscript stuff. And he's inviting RR to visit. And so if I hadn't gone, they wouldn't know Scarborough was there. He was safe there, but nobody knew it was there. There wasn't a real findings list of what was there. So maybe somewhere in somebody's archive, there are some of these materials tucked away under the letter K or Kelsey or under Scarborough. I just hope that some other things will come to life. But yeah, the Kelsey thing was perplexing because I would have thought there would be some Scarborough things.
Can be a job for a new Kelsey archivist.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
I know. Why not?
Well, thank you so much, Professor Ronnick. This was such an incredible and interesting flash talk today. I just want to thank you again for being here with us to talk about Scarborough and his life and the connections between the Kelsey. And I just want to invite everyone else to please look at our website for future flash talks, and feel free to email myself or Professor Ronnick if you have additional questions on this material. So thank you all for being with us here today. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.